So one of the questions that I get asked a lot is, what is this CBF business that I keep hearing about? Well, like most organizations, we've got a lot of common acronyms that you'll hear from time to time, and CBF is probably the most common, well, except for FBC, which stands for First Baptist Church. But CBF stands for the Cooperative Baptist Fellowship, and the Cooperative Baptist Fellowship is the larger family of Baptist Christians to which this particular church belongs. Now, like most denominations and religious organizations, the origins of CBF can be kind of arcane if you're not deeply versed in the history and language of the movement at the time that it got started. But essentially, the origins of CBF came in the late 80s and early 90s as the Southern Baptist Convention, or SBC, was grappling internally with some deep questions about what it means to be a Baptist in the 20th and 21st centuries. At the time, some fundamentalist leaders were beginning to exert some pretty extreme power over the SBC, and they were demanding conformity, they were denying liberty, and they were in particular standing in the way of women who felt called of God to be ministers in various capacities. So in the late 90s, a group got together to start talking about some of these questions, and eventually that became the CBF. Now, over time, the organization has sort of positioned itself as a relatively moderate, big tent kind of an organization, but it does remain committed to the historic Baptist principles of autonomy and freedom of conscience. So that means that CBF churches can and do run the gamut from conservative all the way to progressive. But as a whole, most CBF churches believe that God calls women to be pastors and to lead the church at every level, from lay leaders all the way up to senior pastors, and in fact, even the head of our denomination. She just retired recently. But most CBF churches do believe that God calls women to be leaders and pastors at every level of the church, and most CBF churches are engaged in a more holistic approach to missions and justice work across the globe. But the interesting thing is that CBF isn't really a denomination in the way that, say, the United Methodist Church is, because CBF doesn't really own property, and they maintain a pretty lean national staff. Ultimately, CBF is really about equipping and networking individual congregations and organizations and even individual Baptists to do the work that they might not have been able to do without these partnerships. So CBF provides resources for church planting, for missions education, and for Christian advocacy. They collect and distribute funds to support field personnel who are specially commissioned folks who share the gospel in a holistic way here in the United States and all across the world. In fact, we've got a few right here in eastern Kentucky and all throughout Appalachia. And CBF convenes groups of like-minded people across a variety of topics in order to make connections and build partnerships and do work that might not otherwise have been done had those partnerships not been forged. But probably the best thing about CBF is that you can be involved with it as much or as little as you choose to be. If you come to this congregation bearing the deep wounds of church trauma that so often come from denominational politics and infighting, you don't have to concern yourself with CBF. There's no bishop who's going to move your pastor. There's no board of ordained ministry that's going to tell you that you can or cannot serve because of your gender or because of your sexual orientation. But at the same time, if you're the kind of person who loves the collaborative and connective work that big organizations have the ability to provide, you get to dive in with both feet as much and as often as you want. We have folks here at FBC Moorhead who participate with CBF on the local, state, and national levels. So the choice is up to you. At the end of the day, our primary concern here at First Baptist is the people that God has entrusted to us right here in the community of Moorhead. But at the same time, it's really nice to know that we belong to a body of like-minded Christians who help us do work that we might not otherwise be able to do and share the burden of bringing the gospel to a world that so desperately needs it. So now I hope you know a little bit more about CBF. Once again, I'm Aaron Coyle-Carr, the pastor here at First Baptist Church of Moorhead, and if this sounds like something you're interested in, we'd love for you to join us here for worship Sundays at 10:45 a.m.